Hi, everyone. I'm here with Luna Ugrenović, who is a new member of the Greenepsych team. I couldn't be happier to have her. She's been here just about a month, and today's an opportunity to get to know Luna better. So, Luna, welcome and welcome to Greenepsych and welcome to today's Zoom.
Well, thank you. I'm very excited to be here and very excited to start this new chapter in my career. I'm originally from Serbia. I came to United States as a student athlete on a rowing scholarship. And so originally lived in Miami for a while, but then made my way up eventually to the Philly area.
Yeah, now you had a stop in West Virginia, and you weren't just in West Virginia to be a tourist. You were there. Just let the audience know a little bit about kind of where your background is professionally in terms of your degrees.
Yeah, so I got my undergrad degree in psychology at Barry University down in Miami, and then I stayed there for my master's in sports psych. And while I was in my master's, I also coached for 2 years as a graduate assistant coach for their rowing team. And then I made my way up to West Virginia, like you were saying, to do my PhD in sports psychology and also my master's in counseling. And so at this point, I've completed my counseling degree up there. I had some very cool experiences working with different student athletes and different populations. And I am very close to finishing my dissertation, very excited about that and hopefully wrapping that chapter up soon. Yeah, I've moved to Philly recently and I'm very excited to explore the area and see what this city has to offer.
I think you're going to love Philly. I do. I think you've liked it already. Hopefully you'll fall in love with Philly. I'm a New Yorker. It took me a while to adjust after New York. You know, it's hard to compare, but I really have fallen in love with Philly. Now you're here working at Greenepsych, and one of the reasons you're such a great fit for us is because you've got a number of strengths. And tell us a little bit about the areas that you have the most professional experience in, want to be sort of specializing in now that you're here with us.
Yeah, well, up to this point, I've worked in a athletic department as their therapist and sports psych consultant up in West Virginia. And so a lot of the clients that I worked with up to this point were college age athletes and college age students. And so young emerging adults is most experience I have in, but also worked with some kids and adults as well along the way. With young adults, it's very interesting to work on their identities and transitions and ways in which you want to become full adults and kind of take their lives in their hands. And so I really enjoyed that aspect. And I also had a unique opportunity to work with a lot of international student athletes and those who come a long way and are not necessarily so close to home has been another interesting population. I'm also trained in EMDR, which is a trauma therapy and has been shown to be very helpful with people experiencing from big traumas and PTSD symptoms, but also maybe smaller traumas and things that we consider more as like stressors. So I'm very excited to use that with athletes and non-athletes. I've seen a lot of progress with some of the clients I already used it with. So that's an area that I'm interested in building further. And then I think the last piece, but also a big one, is my dissertation specifically focuses on how to have mental health conversations and how to refer people to therapy. Specifically, my dissertation focuses on student athletes, but I think it's very applicable to really any group or population. And what I'm finding in the study is that things we already knew, which is these conversations can be tricky and they can be uncomfortable. And so my hope with the results that I'm analyzing at the moment is to come forward with some clear guidelines on how we can engage in these conversations where the person feels supported and motivated to follow through and actually seek help. And so I'm hoping to kind of continue building on that and help people who either work with athletes or people who work with people who need therapy to kind of assist in their process of feeling more confident in having these conversations.
You know, as you're talking, it's clear that you have both mental health background and interest in continuing to support people around better mental health, or even referral, even around the question of how to get people in the door to get referred. And then, of course, you've got a sport kind of performance background as well, right? You kind of are able to do both, which I think is why you're also such a great fit here at Greenepsych. If we come back to EMDR for a second, what are the kinds of athletes that might have what kind of experiences would make them good candidates for EMDR? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, it's a great question. If we're specifically talking about athletes, I think it could be from, experiencing a very stressful performance, or maybe a performance that went really poorly and kind of got in the way of feeling like they can perform the way they physically can in the following games or competitions would be a good one. Another important one is injuries, those who experience maybe very painful or traumatic injuries that took them out of their sport would be another good candidate for EMDR. But then even if we're talking general population, so not only athletes, regular human beings, I think any of these experiences that were either too soon and too fast or for too long and too little. So basically things that change us in negative ways can be processed with EMDR. And so it can go from like a typical traditional traumatic experiences to things that maybe don't seem so much as trauma, but are a constant stressor in our life that contribute to some of the symptoms we experience and ways in which we interact with the world. So long story short, I think really anyone can benefit, but specifically for those who experience big and scary or traumatic things are good candidates.
That's great. That's great. And trauma-informed therapy, I know is something that everyone is now sort of starting to pay more attention to. I know the NCAA, as you and I both know, are now requesting that college campuses have therapists just like yourself that are available to perform the sort of, or offer the kind of services that you're talking about, like with the MDR for those who've experienced trauma. So we feel lucky to have you and that you're kind of in our stable here, and we could offer those services here at Greenepsych. Just the last question I have for you and for people who might be interested in the work you do is, you didn't go on about your background, but you've had a very successful background in rowing at the collegiate level, and have been also then supporting teams at West Virginia, rowing teams at West Virginia as well. And now you're here with us. And one of the big one of the really reasons people come into our practice, one of the reasons they're referred to us oftentimes is these high school kids who are struggling with the 2K. The 2,000 meter test on the erg has been a nightmare for a lot of athletes. I don't know anyone who loves the erg.
Right.
Even our Olympians don't love the erg, but for the high school kids especially, there's a big requirement about getting certain times on the erg in the 2K in order to be considered recruitable at certain universities. That's just the fact. And people come to see us because they want to know how they can improve their times, and they realize that part of it is probably mental. They train their butts off, but they realize at some point it's as much a mental game as it is a physical game. So do you have any advice or tips for those athletes who want to get on top of their mental game and they've got a 2K test coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I definitely want to empathize. I can relate, and I still have memories of trying to meet my own standards to get recruited. So very stressful times, probably one of the most stressful periods of my life if I had to compare it. So it is difficult and it's not easy. And definitely there are things that we could work on in terms of the mental game that I think can help. And with that being said, I think the biggest thing is really developing and collaborating on creating a mental game plan for the 2K. And so helping those rowers really be specific about how they want to approach those, halfway through or just passing halfway through point where things are the most painful and the most difficult to kind of stick with the plan. And so having that mental game plan can be very helpful. And then practicing it as well is another piece to that, right? Just making sure that you have time to really find what works for you. Another one I think that is very important is also anchoring yourself in the present moment. And that can look like in different ways in different things. But basically, oftentimes we get caught into thinking, will I get recruited, or how is this 2K going to affect my future? And it will. It's a reality, but it's not always helpful to focus on that. So making sure that I am grounded in this particular moment. So that can be this practice, that can be this 500 meters in this entire 2K, or it could be just this stroke. And really just focusing one stroke at a time tends to help those young athletes not then get overwhelmed with all the possible consequences, good and bad, that come with the actual result. So that's another big one.
Yeah.
And really asking yourself that question, like, is your head where your feet are? Are you really in the present moment, or are you thinking about what happened or what's about to happen, which tends to not work out too well on the erg. And then the last one that I've seen, a lot of athletes I worked with use it, but I use it myself and found it very effective, is really creating this inner ally that is almost like an imaginative ally that is there for me or for the athletes to kind of guide them through the 2K. So for everyone that looks slightly different, but we all have our own ways in which we want to be motivated. And so taking that in our own hands and making sure that we have that voice in our head that it believes in us and that believes in our strength to push through it, can also be very powerful, especially if we practice that. And that can be from visualizing it and really just exploring like through the, seeing it in our minds, but then also practicing it in harder practices or practices that lead up to the 2K of, is this ally helping me reach the standards that I want? And then kind of tweaking as we go.
That's interesting. I imagine that's part of what you do, is you help people understand who their inner ally is and what that inner ally is going to say to them when the going gets tough, and how to lean on it and rely on it when the time comes. It's reminding me that some people probably give their inner ally like a name. I bet some people might find it, associating it with a certain person or a certain image or somehow, I imagine, would also kind of get them out of that negative mindset and give them something else more productive to focus on.
Yeah, that's the hope. That's the hope for the mind where it's helpful. Yeah.
That's the hope. No, well, these are great. So these are the types of things that if someone were to come talk to you, you could help them figure out which one of these, or if not all of these, they could kind of build their mental toolkit, could help them build their mental toolkit so they go into their next 2K a little bit more mentally ready, not just physically ready, to hopefully be able to achieve their goals.
Yeah. 2Ks are hard, and it takes a lot of hard work. And I think the big piece to it is also training the mind the same way we train the body.
Yeah, they're hard, and there's so much mystique around them now. There's so much, some coaches give people heads up, and that has its own set of problems. And some coaches say, I'm better off just telling them the day they get here, because they don't want them to get so rattled so early. And then that has its own advantages and disadvantages. I appreciate for coaches too, it's hard to know how to help their athletes in what's going to be the best approach. But I know that's the kind of work that you do, not, with athletes, you work with coaches. And well, great. No, this is really helpful. So this is just kind of like a little mini Zoom for people to get to know you better. There's more information on you on our website that digs a little bit further into your background. So thank you, though, Luna, for joining us today. And again, we're lucky to have you.
Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.